Hello, Mr. Chapman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, great, great. So good afternoon. So the gentleman joining us from Brasilia is Mr. Todd Chapman, the Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy. He is the Charge d'Affaires, the number one person for the U.S. government in Brazil, and he so kindly agreed to participate in our conference from Brasilia. Thank you so much, Mr. Chapman. Just a quick description. Oh, sure, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Margarita. I really appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you here alongside my colleague from the economics section, Nat Turner, here from the U.S. Embassy in Brasilia. And I had the good pleasure 2 years ago to meet Margarita and others from Bay, Brazil, when we had an ambassador's tour from Latin American countries. We went to California, and you kindly hosted us there in San Francisco. And then in Silicon Valley, we had some nice meetings there, and we continue to get good results from that meeting 2 years ago, as we see increasing interest from companies in the Silicon Valley in terms of coming to Brazil. So thank you to Bay Brazil, and thank you for all that you're doing there to build networks of friendship and business. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Mr. Todman. I just want to give you
Congratulate you on this conference. It's a great opportunity to be able to have a chance to speak with you and to hear any questions you might have for us. I thought I would just start off with a couple of items. First of all, I feel a very close relationship with Stanford. First of all, you have my former boss working there, Condoleezza Rice, so that's very important. And secondly, your basketball coach, Johnny Dawkins, was a great player at my alma mater at Duke University. So we're very glad that we were able to export that talent to Stanford. I had the chance to help Johnny with his, I was one of his math tutors when he was a freshman in college. I doubt that he remembers that too very much, but I'm very glad that he's found a home there at Stanford. Let me just make a couple of very introductory comments about what we see happening in our relationship with Brazil, and then take any comments or questions you might have. First of all, the relationship between the United States and Brazil is strong and growing stronger every day. Our relationship is built on shared values, it's based on shared principles, it's based on the two largest democracies and economies of the Western Hemisphere working together and realizing that it's in both of our interests to develop a very strong partnership. That is why when President Rousseff went to Washington last year, she gave the title to all of her message there in Washington, that she was looking to build a strategic partnership for the 21st century. And we really think that accurately captures what we're trying to do as a government with the Brazilian government, is to build that strategic partnership. So we've seen this happen across all sectors. We're seeing it certainly in our business relationship with a two-way trade relationship of $76 billion. We see a growing amount of investment that's going both ways between our two countries, with special note of the expanded Brazilian investment in the U.S. economy. And we see it in exactly the topic of your discussion today in the area of technology and innovation. More and more we're seeing Brazil's interest in forming partnerships with U.S. companies in the field of technology and innovation. This has become a really key focus of President Rousseff, as she even renamed her Ministry of Science and Technology to be the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. Brazil represents approximately 3% of the world's economy. I'm told that they produce about 3% of the world's scientific papers, but only 0.3% of the world's patents. And so they realize that they have a challenge of how do they translate their economic and intellectual power into real economic power that they can use, much like they have seen witnessed there in California and right there on Stanford campus. So this is one of the challenges that they have, and one of the reasons why increasingly Brazil is looking to Silicon Valley to look for some answers as to how they can become a more creative and innovative economy. So lastly, I'll just point out that this week I was in Rio de Janeiro the last 2 days for the third summit of the U.S.-Brazil Summit on Innovation. And this is something sponsored by the Brazilian government together with the U.S. Council on Competitiveness. And we had a large number of speakers from universities from Brazil and the United States, as well as leading business and government leaders, to talk about how can we work together on innovation going into the future. So the seminar topic that you have chosen is very topical indeed. It's timely. And we at the U.S. Embassy are engaged in a wide range of working groups with the Brazilian government to advance exactly these issues. So with that, I welcome any questions or comments you might have about our official relationship. And once again, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate this. Even because you are a Bay Brazilian. You lived in Brazil for how long? And you speak Portuguese a little bit, right? If I recall it correctly, you lived in Brazil in 72?
That's right. I've had the good fortune of living a total of 10 years in Brazil. I moved here as a child when I was 11 years old to São Paulo. And so I have worked here as I had my own business here several years ago, and I've been here now for the last 2 years. Então, para mim, grande prazer estar aqui neste lindo país.
Great. I just want to quickly point out that we have here about, 150 people. These are Brazilians, expats, Brazilians from Brazil who are visiting. And I think the largest delegation here is from Florianópolis. Am I correct? Yeah. And of course, we have Americans working for Brazilian companies and also for US companies that operate in Brazil. When I met you in 2011, one of the topics that you point out was that 10 years ago, companies in the US needed a China strategy. And in 2011, they needed a Brazil strategy. With all the concerns over inflation, the lower of the growth rate in Brazil, do you still feel the same?
Absolutely. And it's kind of you to remember that in 2011, that was my message, which is that for U.S. companies, Brazil remains still a new frontier to be explored and to be taken very seriously in the world of business. Because while we've had large American companies here for a long time, we've had Ford, General Motors, Boeing, etc. What we don't have are the medium-sized companies. We don't have really the newer to market, smaller companies that haven't figured out that Brazil is the 7th largest economy in the world, soon to be the 6th, soon to be the 5th. And this is going to be one of the major marketplaces in the world. It already is, but it's even going to become more important. I can say with great pleasure that since 2011, many companies have taken us up on this challenge. Many have done things like Fortune 500 companies hosting their board of directors in Brazil for their annual meeting to help open the eyes of their board members why Brazil plays such an important role in their long-term global planning. So that remains the same. The fact that growth rates have slowed down has concerned a lot of people, but look, growth rates have slowed down in the United States, and we're still the largest recipient of foreign investment in the world. Brazil has more investment now coming from the United States than ever before, and one of the reasons is that corporate America is discovering that Brazil is not just a good place to invest in terms of extracting raw materials or producing things. It's a fantastic consumer market. And that's what led United Health Services to buy Amil, which is the largest private healthcare provider in the country, for $5 billion. That's a huge investment. So we're seeing more and more American companies move into the consumer market. They purchased the majority share of Talking Stock, furniture retail. They bought one of the leading pharmacies. We see this happening over and over again, but it means there's still great room for expanded U.S. investment here. And knowing that I'm talking to a large number of Brazilians who are working in the United States, you have an incredible opportunity. And I don't want to recruit you away from the Googles, Apples, and every place else that you work there in Silicon Valley. But your expertise is highly valued in Brazil right now. And whenever somebody comes from the Silicon Valley to Brazil, we hear over and over again, we want to replicate in Brazil what you have in Silicon Valley. And I'll give you one short little story on that. When Instagram got purchased for $1 billion, one of the instant celebrities was the young Brazilian, who I believe was 10% shareholder, and I'm sorry I don't recall his name. And he was a Stanford student, I believe. And I believe he earned about $100 million off the transaction. And the question that was on the cover of Veja magazine was, why did a Brazilian have to go to Stanford to be that creative and successful? What can we do in Brazil to translate that innovative culture down to Brazil? And every one of you Brazilians who work there in Silicon Valley, you know what that is. And I can tell you that there's a Brazil hungry and ready to learn that. And so we're doing everything we can to encourage exchanges now between universities and between companies, because we believe that's going to be good for Brazil, good for the United States, and good for our mutual business interests.
Great. I would like to open the floor for questions. Anyone has a question for Mr. Chapman? Quite a few people have. Why don't we start with Ron Journey? Mr. Chapman, Ron Journey is a Brazilian that moved to the Silicon Valley when he was 18. And he hasn't left since then. He is very successful. He's the founder and CEO of Playphone, and I also have the honor to have him in our board.
Thank you. Pleasure to be speaking to you, sir. I was moderating a panel just about an hour ago about e-commerce and m-commerce. So I'm going to make a question related to the panel. And we were talking about why Amazon, the greatest e-commerce company in the world, an American company, cannot be successful in Brazil. And the answer was a lot of the regulation issues, a lot of the fiscal issues, a lot of all the things that makes that business hard to be competitive in the Brazilian market. And I ask a question, to the panel, do you think within the next 3 years, Amazon will be a successful company in Brazil and will be present in Brazil? And a lot of people was a little shaky about 3 years, but maybe in a lifetime, you will be. And the same question to you, sir. Do you think Amazon will be able to do business in Brazil in the next 3 years and become a successful company in Brazil?
Okay, thank you, Ron. As a good diplomat, I know I cannot speak for Amazon, so I will not speak for Amazon. But what I can do is give you my own thoughts on that. First of all, e-commerce in Brazil is growing extremely fast. I hope you had some data, or somebody had some data about e-commerce and how quickly it's growing in Brazil. But it's growing very fast. And it's growing for a couple of reasons. One is you have great penetration of internet throughout the country. Number two, it's increasingly getting to more rural areas. And rural areas are always good markets for e-commerce. And three, as younger people become more comfortable with e-commerce, they're willing to give their Visa cards and buy things. So I think e-commerce has a fantastic future in Brazil. And I think several American companies are waking up to that, as well as Brazilian companies. Now, I don't know about Amazon, but I know that many American companies right now are looking at expanding into Brazil when it comes to e-commerce. That doesn't deny that there are lots of problems. You hit on several of them. Fiscal problems, you've got infrastructure problems, you've got all the problems with the laws, et cetera. You've got lots of difficulties importing products. So if you're trying to sell imported goods, I mean, they're going to be extremely expensive. But more and more people are getting accustomed to purchasing things online. I'll give you an example. Amway, evidently, is distributing a lot of products online, or you order online and then they ship right to your door. The express package delivery business here is booming. So people are getting used to getting things expressed overnight or whatever. So I think that e-commerce has a huge future in this country. You'll have to deal with all those problems you mentioned, Ron, but so does every other company. And so you're not at a competitive disadvantage by dealing with those issues. It probably argues against small operations, and this is something we're seeing as we're seeking to promote the expansion of commercial relations, is it's hard to get small U.S. companies to come here because of the custo Brasil, the Brazil cost. That is very difficult and very costly to overcome. But I remain very bullish and optimistic. If I could buy an e-commerce future on Brazil, I would buy it.
Thank you very much.
I think you have time for one last question. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you for your time. There are some other countries in Latin America, such as Chile and Argentina, that have access to the E1 and E2 visas that let entrepreneurs and treaty traders come to the United States, and that encourages a lot of connections. Are there any plans to expand or do something similar for Brazil to encourage Brazil and U.S. trade and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, the e-visa program is something that's used by many countries to encourage investment in the United States. It's something the Brazilians have not shown interest in, to my knowledge, the Brazilian government. And we pretty much respond to government interest. So in some of our consular dialogues where we talk about visa issues, to my knowledge, that hasn't come up as something that they have requested. We have not heard from any Brazilians that have had difficulty getting the appropriate visa, whether it's an L1 or whatever it is, so that they can transfer to run their businesses in the United States. If you're hearing that, I'd be interested in it, but it would probably best be funneled through the Brazilian government so that they could then raise it with us.
I thank you so much, Mr. Chapman, for joining us today, and we look forward to having you in person here next time you travel to the region.
I would like that very much, Margarita. It's been a pleasure. I wish you all the best, and if there's anything we can do for you here at the U.S. Embassy in Brazil or any of our consulates, please just contact us. We're here to help.
I'll send you my list. Thank you. Obrigada.